As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. We're delighted to have a returning guest tonight. Brad Harris, founder and host of Full Spectrum Survival, is here with us back on Reluctant Preppers. Brad, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
We have had a hard time getting you on our production schedule for a couple of reasons, one of which was that you relocated. You moved your family from urban setting to a homestead, and later in this interview, we'd like to pick your brain a little bit about some of the strategic planning that went into that for you, because we have a lot of our viewers who are contemplating similar possibilities to improve their resilience, and then some of the early lessons learned that you might be able to share with us that have come out of that experience so far. I know it's still an unfolding drama because it's fresh, but the second reason we had a hard time getting you is because you were hosting or participating in a major conference and training session this weekend, so we may get to ask you for some key takeaways from that as well. But if we could first hit on a couple of really hot stories that are now finally breaking into the news, and that's part of the main reason I wanted to bring them up is twofold. One, because they represent a clear and present dangers to public health, but even more that this has been masked, underreported, and the informed information that's been provided to people is too little too late. So if we could talk first about the Fukushima reactor leak in Japan. You have focused on this for months, if not years, on your Full Spectrum Survivor channel, talking about what the real long-term and broad-scale impact is of that. But there are new developments in the last week that really break that open. And if you could just give us a quick rundown of what you think some of the most important, what people need to know who want to be aware about the new developments with the Fukushima reactor leak.
Absolutely. Like you said, it is not being talked about enough. The reactor leak, the entire disaster that's going on in Fukushima is literally a population-changing event. Not an extinction level event as it stands right now, but a population-changing event. And what I mean by that is that there is so much radiation that is being just freely flowed out into the ocean that it is now starting to affect the oceanic wildlife. It's starting to affect the tree growth in the areas, and we're starting to see some of the long-term fallout from this disaster. So I would say without a doubt, the Fukushima nuclear reactor mess is a long-duration emergency that each one of us need to put into our long-term preparedness plans and how to deal with that. And, I'm not one to drop any names, but if you go back over the guests, and you've been on my channel for the weekly live report where we go live, and we've had some big guests there too, just like you. And I had one recently. After the show, he said, Brad, I want you to tell me really, am I doing the right thing by changing my eating habits to avoid the potential buildup of radiation from Fukushima? Without a doubt, it is my personal opinion, personal suggestion, that there is such an inundation of radiation going out into the ocean and just freely flowing back into the earth that it would behoove the individual that has the wherewithal and the forward thinking to start to alter their eating habits to definitely take it into consideration. Now, that brings about a lot of fatalism in people. And they say, well, if I can't, if I can't see it, I can't shoot it. They kind of pick an all or nothing. But you have to consider that it is literally changing the population on a genetic level. So what we're starting to see here is severe radiation damage on wildlife around Japan. And you would expect that because this is the worst nuclear disaster in history. So now we're starting to see this concentric circle blow up. It's starting to expand, and the visible effect is getting further and further away. And just to kind of bring it back to what's going on at Fukushima, they recently recorded 530 sieverts per hour. Now, this is the Tokyo Electric Power Company, who has been behind the ball. They've been behind the curve in public disclosure, along with the Japanese government and really the governments of all of the world since the disaster struck. And I remember that very night when it was happening. It first started and they were saying it's okay, it didn't reach the site. Then, okay, water came over the site, nothing was damaged. And then, okay, something was damaged, but there's no radiation leak. And it became this slow reveal of information so as not to shock the public. And what we're seeing today is just a continued slow reveal where you're not going to see exactly what is happening in the damage unless you've A, researched it for yourself, or B, wait until the mainstream narrative picks up to a point where it's too late to do anything about it.
That's the key that we wanted to touch on with you is when news comes too little too late, because there's a huge ulterior motive on the part of if it's in the case of a profit-making company to avoid commercial distress and impact to their profitability. If it's in the case of a government, it can be to quote-unquote avoid panic or social disruption and rioting, looting, all kinds of disruptions. But neither of those takes into account the well-being of the population.
That's right. Yeah, and that's right. And we have to kind of peel that layer back and see that to the governments of the world and to the elite that control within those governments of the world or outside of them, we are citizens to be governed. They are the government and we are to be governed. So our job here is to pay your taxes, go to work, and be happy. Those three main goals, that is all your government wants you to do. Pay your taxes, go to work, and continue to be happy. And if you look at the facility of chemical pharmaceuticals and the facility of our society, it is all geared around those things. You go to the doctor and you tell them, I have something wrong. They fix you up enough that you can go to work. You go to the doctor and say, I'm depressed. They're going to give you antidepressants to be happy, all so that you can continue to go back to work. So you're absolutely right. It is about productivity. And at the end of the day, a monetary involvement in that productivity. So I want to touch real quick on Fukushima. So 530 sieverts. At one sievert, if a person is exposed to one sievert over the period of 1 hour, they're going to suffer radiation sickness and a genetic change within months. At 5 sieverts, they're going to die within 1 month. And at 10 sieverts, they're going to die within 2 to 3 weeks. And there are 530 sieverts continually, every hour of the day, nonstop, being released into the environment and into the ocean. That to me is an amazing number, and it's one that we all have to take into consideration and think what this is going to do for the generations of the Earth and how you and I can better prepare for this.
And in that vein of trying to be aware and to protect your family, yourself, your family, and your loved ones, can you touch on the principle of if you wait for the official warning, it's too late? That's right. Yeah, absolutely. If you wait until you're told that there's a disaster, you are too late. And that brings up something else that I wanted to talk with you about, and that's the current ongoing Oroville Dam spillover disaster. So you have people that, like we said, the governments of the world have, or at least the governments of California, have allowed to live far too close to the known spillover zone of the Oroville Dam. Now 200,000 people were told last night that they need to get out of their homes, and they need to do it so expeditiously that their life would be in danger if they didn't leave at that very moment. So future preparation is a huge point in making sure that each one of us has a go bag. And now you look at the go bags of the world, and you look at especially what the official narrative for a go bag should be. And it contains your marital documents and social security card and things like that, which aren't as necessary. You really need to facilitate the basics of survival in your go bag. So you need the ability to create fire, because fire is going to purify your water, warm your body so you don't go hypothermic, create smoke and signal so that you can get rescued or help rescue yourself. It's also going to ward off wild animals, things like that. Then you need to, of course, have water and a way to purify it. I would suggest everybody listening, go to Walmart and buy a Sawyer mini water filter. It's $20. It fits in your backpack.
and I believe it's at around 100,000 gallons of water, and just treat it right. If you're in freezing conditions, put it in your sleeping bag with you. So you've got the ability to create fire, some way to treat water, and then you need shelter. And a sil nylon tarp shelter, really anything that is easy so that you don't have to carry around a 30-pound tent with you, just something that you can have in that bag and set up to save your life and the lives of those you love.
Again, the principle here being that this is a battle that preparedness-minded individuals have to fight all the time, is within their own mind, and certainly getting the feedback from friends and neighbors, no matter how well-intended, and coworkers, but certainly from watching and trusting the mainstream corporate media to be the source of indication for you when you really need to take action. All of those are going to put you at unnecessary risk. So what alternate sources of information do you recommend for people to keep tuned into, since they know that they can't rely on any of those that are more culturally normal?
Well, the first I'd say is listen to the people that come on your show. That is definitely going to keep people abreast of current alternative information. And there is this huge push within not just the USG, not just the U.S. government, not just the Western world, but all of the governments of all of the world over to push a fake news agenda. And what they're doing, and I believe it was a Princeton study, if I remember right, recently put fake information and then real information in front of people. And as long as they pushed out the fact that one of these two would be fake, it called into question the real information. So this is definitely a method of warfare and the psychological warfare game to control the mind of the individual so that they stop looking to alternative information and they stop thinking for themselves. And they focus just what they know could be true information, and that would be the mainstream narrative. So everybody listening needs to step back a moment and look outside that narrative and say, okay, where else can I gather information from? Of course, if you go to places like Press TV, RT, they're going to have a narrative of their own. But what you need to do is to take into account all of these different battling agendas and make a good, conscious decision and a moral decision that fits within your ideals and say, okay, I think this is the right direction, because you're going to see this come into play the world over. You're going to see it during a pandemic, during a regional disaster. You're going to see it during times of war. You're going to see this happen again and again, and you need to step back and look at all of the available information and then make a good decision based on yourself and, like you said, your peers.
If we could touch for a moment on, you mentioned in passing earlier about medical information that is being underreported or withheld. I have a personal story we were talking about just before we started the broadcast, because you asked how I was doing. One thing I wanted to reveal to our listeners is that myself and my wife are being treated for chronic Lyme's disease, which I contracted about 7 years ago from a deer tick when playing paintball in the woods in Wisconsin, and got immediate classic textbook symptoms on the surface, got immediate medical, 1 round of antibiotics, and because I woke up a few days later after the initial embedding of the tick, feeling like about a 90-year-old man. I had shaking fevers and could hardly get out of bed. I was aching so badly, had zero energy. It's just total lethargy and profound fatigue. With 1 round of antibiotics over a course of 10 days, I was like bounced right back and thought, because I was told by what we call the conventional medical system that I was cured. Right. However, about 5 years later, I started to develop a host of other symptoms such as heart palpitations and other aches and pains that, and my wife started getting just inexplicable skeletal muscular pains and strains and fatigue and brain fog and memory loss. Both of us were affected that way. We got to an alternative medical doctor who we've had on our show before and got some consulting advice from our off-grid medical doctor, Jay Nielsen, who gave us really an earful about what is not being reported about the rampant underreporting of the prevalence of Lyme's disease nationally, and more from a conspiracy as far as containing the news is that the new, more virulent strain of limes that's being seen in the wild now was not seen prior to the return of our Desert Shield vets, where there is at least there is evidence to suggest that there was actually a weaponized version of some diseases that were attempted to be employed, that were developed in the U.S., tried to be used in Operation Desert Shield. When the vets, some of them got inadvertently, unintentionally exposed to that, brought it back home, then bitten by ticks, and now it's in the wild. And so you have basically this weaponized version of limes that's being completely denied by the mainstream medical community, and it's a very intensive 8 to 9 month course of intermittent treatments. And if you look up Herxheimer reaction and also bioslime sequestration, about how these new, more virulent forms of these spirochetes are able to hide between your cells in your body and hide up against bony surfaces and cover themselves with bioslime so they're invisible to your immune system while they replicate and then burst out and affect. And then when you actually do use some special enzymes to dissolve the bioslime, and then some special intermittent bursts of combinations of antibiotics of increasing strength to attack them, kind of sneak attack, you get these die-offs, and it's the toxicity from the die-offs of the effective treatment that makes you feel like you're back on death's doorstep again. So anyway, just to say that there are like three paths. You'll either hear that from the mainstream medical establishment that either limes is not that big of a deal if it's treated early and treated once, or secondly, you'll hear it is incurable from some people that have later information, or you'll hear this third path, which is no, it can be managed, but you've got to do it in a very informed and aware way. So once again, if you wait around to be told this by your family doctor who may be totally unaware of this, you're really battling without full information. You can't be prepared if you're not aware of what you're really up against. So just
you're absolutely.
Go ahead.
You're right. And I've seen some white papers on the change to biofilms. Just like you were saying, biofilms are a really dangerous disease transmission form. And Legionell's bacteria, Legionella pneumophilia, that is driven through biofilms. And so you're right in that there is a change going on in the natural world and in the way that humans interact with it. And I have to go back to very informed discussions between virologists and disease experts of the world who have said plainly, and this is just from a mathematical and a visible look at the world, that humanity's reign on health is coming to an end. And it has to come to an end because the world is starting to take back. So like when you brought up the conspiratorial side of things, that got me thinking, because who benefits from what used to be a single regimen of chemical pharmaceutical now to an 8-month or maybe even perpetual regimen of it? Who benefits from that?
Well, and there's There's also the denial of and the fear of liability. We've certainly heard that in the past about, mercury in dental fillings being told, no, it's not a problem, or fluoride in the water, not a problem, or childhood immunizations, any causal link with, from pertussis vaccine to autism, no, not a problem. So if you look at any of those and say, is there a conflict of interest here? You bet there is, and that's another reason.
Absolutely right.
Yep. So if we could jump forward to maybe a more positive outlook, could you give us a few key takeaways, some of the high points from your weekend? First, describe what it was that you were involved in over this weekend, and any big high points you could share with our audience.
Absolutely. And first, if you don't mind me jumping back for just one second. So, at the beginning of the show, I started talking about a guest on the Weekly Live Report who had said, am I doing the right thing? And they were looking after ways to cleanse their body from radiation because they live on the west coast of the United States. So they're a lot closer to the problem than I am. Now, during the Chernobyl accident, the children of Chernobyl were given fruit pectin, 100% pectin, in a daily regimen, and what the pectin does is it actually pulls through your organs and through your entire body radiation and heavy metals and dispenses it through your urine. So if anybody right now, the reason I brought this up is because you said immunizations and vaccine schedules.
Yeah.
I get asked that all the time. My kids already had vaccines, and I'm kind of seeing this problem. What can I do? And I would say 100% of the time, you're going to see an improvement that cannot hurt if you try a pectin regimen. And that's the same exact pectin that you go to the store and you can your goods with for your preserving your goods. And just start on a regimen of that. There's plenty of information, plenty of white papers that have been done. If you research Chernobyl pectin, you're going to find the white papers that were done by the World Health Organization and multinational organizations that saw I believe it was like an 80% reduction in radiation levels in the children of Chernobyl. And just think of how that can apply to our everyday lives and how we're taking metals in all over the place.
And anything else as far as food choices? Like what about Pacific fish from the Pacific Ocean, whether it's shellfish or crabs or normal ocean fish?
It is wholeheartedly off my plate, and I'll go as far as to say no California oranges on mine, no Washington apples, and no cheese from California. And that's again just my personal preference, personal opinion, because I see the damage that is being wrought that much closer to Fukushima. So I have just stepped back, and all we can all do, the only thing that each one of us can do is mitigate the damage from it. And I would rather mitigate than do nothing at all.
A recurring guest on our program, Joel Salatin, the co-founder of Polyface Farms in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, what we call our activist farmer, who we have on the show, talks in about a week ago. We had him on, and he was talking about local food to the rescue. So again, as you point out, you do not need to, even though it's the supply chain currently and the mass market sources that we have most readily available would trap us into taking in remotely brought in supplies that we have no idea how clean those sources were, but we can look for local alternatives that would help us have better integrity on our food.
That's right. Absolutely. Okay, so back to your other discussion. So a couple of times a year, we'll do survival and preparedness retreats and courses with people. And we actually have another one coming up in June. It's called the Homestead Event. So anybody wants to look, they can go to the homestead-event.com. They're going to see information about it. What we do is we bring course instructors in, and we go over 4 days all of the courses and physical real-life information that a person is going to need to survive a disaster or to thrive on a homestead. So we're going over everything from personal survival, wilderness survival, right down from a primitive level up to modern wilderness survival, personal preparedness, how to plan for your family. And what we'll actually do is sit down with each person and do a 1-year plan with them and get them online so that they can actually take that next step and have a 1-year box or a 1-year plan in their house should anything happen economically or geopolitically. And this goes all the way through to aquaponics, cob building with cob, canning your food, trapping animals. And it's not just watching something on YouTube or hearing about from someone. Everybody gets out and physically does it, because until you put one of those conibear traps, until you feel the tension on that conibear trap, you're not going to know how lethal it is. And you're not going to respect it as much. Just like, as you know, with a firearm, with firearms training, until you start pulling the trigger, and especially trying to hit a moving object, you don't have that respect for it.
Right. And
so we work with, go ahead.
I was just going to say that we had just recently had one of our outdoor survival experts on, J. Wayne Fears, and he stressed also that if you need to be able to live on wild edibles, for example, you best get direct hands-on instruction from somebody who's knowledgeable about your local area and what options are available there, not just to pick up a book and think that you can do it on your own. That gets back to that hands-on experiential learning that you're talking about.
Yeah, that's right. Because the difference, and admittedly so from my standpoint, it is 110% easier to start a fire on a dry, warm day than it is on a cold, wet, and humid day. It's just a world of difference. And the fact of the matter is, you need that fire more on a cold, wet, and humid day than you do on the dry day.
Yeah, windy too.
Exactly, that's right. So actually getting your hands dirty, and we're doing it on a couple of pieces of property here in Wedowee, Alabama, and the people are going to come sleep under the stars with us. We're all going to sleep out. It's going to be like a primitive camping arrangement. It's a lot of fun. I hope if you're free, Duncan, I hope you're able to make it out there with us, or at least, we'll find some way to correlate that information back to you, because it is so much information that I can't express enough the need for people to actually get their hands dirty. And, we're going to be butchering animals there that we trap and catch, going out, doing the hunting, building the fires, cooking the food. We have wild edibles instructors there that know the entire United States and are actually going to walk people through the forest and say, okay, let's all pick that up and eat it, and let's process that this way. And that's a dangerous lookalike. And so, like you said, it's really that hands-on information that you need to be able to learn the difference between what will save your life and the knowledge that we all carried, in the backs of our heads. So if anyone listening is interested, I urge you to go to the homestead-event.com, see which course speakers are going to be there, and see if it's something that interests you.
And now bringing it right back to home, for your own family, you just did a wholesale pull up stakes and move from an urban environment where you used to talk about urban exit strategies and all that sort of thing to a homestead. So I know it's early in the process, but can you give us kind of a few key points about that? First of all, what were your strategic search criteria that you employed when trying to resolve on the ideal location for your homestead?
I guess the first thing that I would want to say, even further back than that, at the base reasoning, is that we are reaching a time in our Earth where crisis events are happening with such frequency and with the potential for large-scale disasters to happen, like the H5N9 or other variation of the avian influenza virus becoming a pandemic. There's a swath of things that can cause each one of us to pull back to our survival and preparedness training at any moment. And I was in a county of 900,000 people. And now I'm in a county of 9,000 people. So it is an immense difference. But like you said, why did I do that? Because if a disaster happens, and there's a multifaceted road here. One, the CDC was just giving sweeping new powers by the current administration to close down major freeways, quarantine individuals without their consent, quarantine minors without the consent or even acknowledgement of the parents, and to really do whatever is necessary on a governmental level to contain an outbreak. And this is an outbreak on any biological front, whether it's man-made or, naturally spread. So that, of course, piques my ear. The ongoing disaster at Fukushima piques my ear, knowing that Fukushima is just one nuclear reactor. And how many are there? There's, how close was I to them? How close was my family to them? Another thing is just getting back to the roots of what I believe we are, as humans, we're put here to do. So whereas the government looks at each one of us and wants us to be happy, pay our taxes, and go to work, I think us as humans, we're on this earth to live life on this earth and through it and connecting to it as much as possible. And that for me means a homestead environment. So to go back to your question on sort of those stepping blocks of what got us here, the first thing is community. And I just kind of let it out into existence that this was the direction that we were going to go, because I'll tell you honestly, my wife and I don't have the credit. We have no credit. So we don't have the credit that we could go, pick up a $60,000 or $100,000 loan and just go figure it out down the road. So it was something that a lot of the listeners are probably forced into the same situation, that you have to consider every direction that you take. And our direction was to kind of just get it out there that we were looking for this. And we found a great community with another YouTuber here in Alabama. His name's Daniel Smith, Go for Green Living, does aquaponics, greenhouses, things like that. He said, hey, well, why don't you come stay here for a little bit, help out on the homestead, And then there's property all over the place here because there's no one around and no one wants to live where no one's around. Now that for me piqued my interest because I want to live where no one else is.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, my wife and I were looking actually at some maps last night and found, educating ourselves on the ratio between population and area of different states. Wyoming has been piquing our interest for several reasons. And on there, it says it is the 9th largest state and 50th in terms of population among all states.
Okay, yeah. And it's those types of things where we looked into the local population. Of course, in our modern day, I wanted to look into crime rate, things like that, and just make sure that it was a good decision for my family and my children. Looked into the area, made some calls, and then just took a leap of faith and said, okay, let's do it. Got up here, and not a month later, we are now talking with a landowner right next door here who wants to get rid of his property for a very inexpensive amount. And I'm talking in the low thousands of dollars.
Wow.
And this is for a couple of acres here. And he has multiples around. And that to me says, okay, well, that's very doable.
Yeah, it's amazing when you're anticipating a change that if you wait for all the stoplights to turn green before you make your move, you miss out on the opportunity to open that first door, and it leads to a hallway of new doors you never would have found and never would have seen. You cannot underestimate the expansive power of taking action and making that initial step.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And so here at this homestead where we're at right now, while we're negotiating that piece of land, we're completely off the grid. He runs solely on solar power, and I'm talking everything, the 100-foot greenhouse, the aquaponics bed, where we just go in there and you pull out 3 to 4 pound tilapia that are then in turn feeding the nutrients to the plant, which are thriving in the greenhouse.
Wow.
So it's really a great hands-on thing for me to see because I'd never done aquaponics before, and to see that actual cycle of life, that sort of food forest in that greenhouse setting was really an amazing thing. And, but like you said, to just pick up your stuff and go, it takes a leap of faith. And to know that just like during the disaster, my wife and children and I would be fine, we'll kind of be fine no matter where we go. So it gave us the heart to just get up and do it.
And it was that you had put out the interest. You let people know in the preparedness community that you were interested in that. It sounds like there was a trigger there when you got a response saying, "Hey, look, there's this opportunity here. Why don't you come?"
Yeah, absolutely, and not just one, multiple responses.
Uh-huh.
And so and I think everyone will find that. And within our community of prepared-minded people, survivalists and preppers, there's a tendency to remain closed in because operational security says if anyone has my information or knows my information, there's a chance for it to be abused.
Right.
So that tendency to remain closed in keeps a lot of us from that open community. But I would venture to say make good, close friends within that community and just put it out there. If you see someone who always makes comments like you do, or always, is talking about a certain website or listening to a certain type of information, make small talk with them and then take that next step. And you're not going to find that everyone falls in line with what you want out of life, but you will find some that do. And then build that community no matter where you're at right now. And I'll tell you, I'll have single mothers come to me and say, my husband, well, they're newly single or potentially single nearby. They'll say, my husband doesn't like preparedness. He thinks I'm crazy and I have to protect my children in the event of a disaster. And let me tell you, that is the survival instinct that has gotten us as humans through thousands, tens of thousands of years of hardship. And it's just being washed away because of a dependency on government. So as you see other people who have this same mindset, grab onto it and talk to them.
Right. I was just saw a television advertisement tonight for, I believe it was a Ford. It was a self-parking car. And I just thought, yeah, it really seems handy. And I thought, wait a minute. When I was a kid, my dad taught me how to do everything on our car. I knew how to not only change the oil and tires, I knew how to change out engines, transmissions, everything. Now they reach a point where all the electronics and everything on the car where people feel like I'm not qualified. I don't have the computerized equipment. There's nothing I can do on my own car. And now we're not even going to be qualified to drive our own cars. So with that increased convenience comes this increased helplessness. Rather than what you're saying is get back to basics and reclaim your competence, your ability to provide and keep your family safe and trust your instincts.
That's right. And get through those things now before a disaster strikes. Learn what gear is going to fail. Let me tell you, so from the climate change from Florida, Tampa, Florida, to this area of Randolph County, Alabama, it is a drastic change. We're upwards of 3,400 feet above sea level, suffered some, we would suffer 1 or 2 cold nights in Florida where it's going to get down in the 20s, but here weeks at a week's stench at a time. And had I not been of a preparedness mind, I wouldn't have had the Army bivy bags, the negative sleeping bags, and would have been much less prepared to put my family into a position where everyone has the potential to get cold, catch pneumonia, things like that. No, we just walked in and it was just like an extended camping trip.
So in your case, and that's what you're pointing out, is that preparedness actually provides you with options. Options provide you with freedom to take choices you couldn't otherwise take.
That's right.
Well, Brad Harris, founder of FullSpectrumSurvival.com. Thank you so much for joining us. Is there anything else here you want to share with our audience before we wrap this tonight?
I would say, I'd love to come back on soon, talk about perpetual servitude and the what the government really is looking for from us. There's some new information about disease super spreaders and how those will play a part in biological outbreaks. And we could really talk all day about the avian influenza virus and how it continues to jump from animals to humans over and over again, so much that this is the worst it has been on record in China, where we have like 357 human cases, small clusters of transmission between humans of the avian influenza virus, with a 30 to 50% fatality rate. So that's huge. And right back at the beginning of the show, we talked about the news you're not being told.
That's right.
And that's one of them. So, I'd love to come back on soon, talk about that. If your guests want to hear it, please, if they want to know something, just reach out and ask. They can email me, fullspectrumsurvival@gmail.com. And if they have the 4 days in June to come out to the Homestead event, it's thehomestead-event.com. We're going to sleep under the stars together, learn how to survive a disaster, and prepare for the unknowns of tomorrow.
Well, Brad, thank you again for being here on Reluctant Preppers. And anybody who's interested in that Homestead event, go to homestead-event.com and check it out. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you. Thank you guys for listening.